In the spring of 2006, the New Orleans Saints were fresh off of a dreadful 3-13 season, but that was just on the field. Off the field, the effects of Hurricane Katrina were still being felt fully in the community, and the entire state of Louisiana needed a boost. The combination of newly signed quarterback Drew Brees as well as new head coach Sean Payton would turn out to be the catalyst that turned the Saints around from being a laughingstock. Brees and Payton would go on to become one of the greatest quarterback coaching combinations in NFL history over their 15 years together. Yet despite all the prolific numbers Brees put up with the Saints across 15 years, the team only managed to appear in and win one Super Bowl. While Brees will forever be a hero in New Orleans for bringing a Lombardi home, the question remains, why didn't the Saints see more postseason success in 15 seasons with the first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback calling the shots? In Brees' 15 seasons, the Saints had a mediocre 9-8 playoff record, and that was when they actually made the playoffs. The team missed the playoffs 6 times with Brees. How is this possible? This video aims to explain why. Enjoy. The 2006 New Orleans Saints were a breath of fresh air for the entire league. They finished 10-6 and secured a first-round bye before making it all the way to the NFC Championship game. Brees was named first-team All-Pro for the only time in his illustrious career, throwing for 4,418 yards and 26 touchdowns. But although Brees was excellent, the Saints' strong drafting helped in the quick turnaround. Second overall pick Reggie Bush never became as dominant as people expected, but he was still a valuable contributor. The real finds for the team came later on, taking future All-Pro guard Jari Evans in the 4th round and the extremely underrated wide receiver Marquez Colston in the 7th round. Second-round pick Roman Harper became a 2-time Pro Bowler, and 7th rounder Zach Strife became a fixture on the team's O-line for the next decade. After dispatching the Philadelphia Eagles in the divisional round, the Saints traveled to the Windy City to face the Chicago Bears, who were led by a dominant defense. The Saints showed resilience fighting back from a 16-0 deficit to make it 16-14 at one point in the second half, but from then on it was all Bears, who ended up earning a trip to the Super Bowl with a decisive 39-14 win. The Saints offense, unsurprisingly, struggled against the dominant Bears defense, scoring just 14 points on 14 possessions, as well as committing 4 turnovers and giving up a safety. Brees was under pressure all game, and his final stat line belied how ineffective he was outside of a few possessions. This was one of the few playoff losses in the Brees era that wasn't heartbreaking. The team was beaten swiftly and decisively, just like my penis every Friday night. 2007 saw both Brees and the team overall take a step back. The Saints finished 7-9 and missed the playoffs. Brees ended up throwing 18 interceptions and was absolutely atrocious over the first 4 games of the season to help put the team in an 0-4 start that was too much to overcome. The team eventually fought back to get to 7-7 before dropping the last 2 games of the year. Even though Brees and the offense weren't quite as potent as the year before, they still finished top 10 in both yards and points per drive. This was the first season of the Brees era in which the Saints' defense was horrific, finishing 27th in points allowed per drive. Productive Brees-led offenses being dragged down into mediocrity by terrible defenses would end up becoming the biggest trend of the Brees era. 2008 was another egregious example of the Saints' defense holding back Brees from seeing more success. The offense was dominant, finishing first in points per drive and scoring at least 20 points in 15 of 16 games. The defense, however, continued to lag behind, finishing 24th in points allowed per drive. Overall, the team finished 8-8 and missed the playoffs for the second straight year, despite Brees becoming the first quarterback since Dan Marino to throw for 5,000 yards in a season. Brees also threw 34 touchdowns and was firmly cementing himself as one of the few elite quarterbacks the league had to offer. The 2009 season will live on forever in the hearts of Saints fans, and it was also the defining moment in both Drew Brees and Sean Payton's careers. The team was firing on all cylinders from day one, starting the season 13-0 and securing the 1 seed. The defense was once again just okay in points allowed per drive, but they forced the second most turnovers in the league. The Saints offense, and Brees in particular, were excellent once again. Brees finished with 4,388 yards and 34 touchdowns, leading the league in completion percentage, touchdowns, touchdown percentage, passer rating, QBR, and adjusted net yards per attempt. The postseason saw more of the same, as he finished with an 8-touchdown touchdown to no interception ratio and a 117 passer rating. He very well might have been robbed of league MVP, but he would eventually get his revenge on Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl. The Saints destroyed future Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner and the Cardinals in the divisional round 45-14, then barely escaped the tough Minnesota Vikings team led by future Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre in the conference championship, thanks to 5 forced turnovers by a score of 31-28 before finally prevailing against future Hall of Fame quarterback Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl by a score of 31-17. The victory was remembered most for Tracy Porter's 74-yard interception return off Manning late in the fourth quarter and Sean Payton's gutsy decision to kick onside to start the second half. Brees was named Super Bowl MVP in what would turn out to be the only Super Bowl appearance of his career. Although a bounty scandal led by defensive coordinator Greg Williams would later dampen the title win in the minds of some, the title firmly cemented Brees as elite and set him on track for the Hall of Fame. The 2010 season can only be described as disappointing for both the Saints and Brees individually. While the Saints offense remained very effective, finishing 7th in points per drive, Brees took a noticeable step back from his ruthlessly efficient 2009 season. He threw for 4,600 yards and 33 touchdowns, but finished with a career-high 22 interceptions and had poor performances in losses to inferior Buccaneers, Cardinals, and Browns teams. This was a rare season in the Brees era where the defense pulled its weight, at least in the regular season, finishing 11th in points allowed per drive. Overall, the team finished with a respectable but relatively disappointing 11-5 record and was forced to go on the road for the wildcard round against the 7-9 Seattle Seahawks. The game is most known for Marshawn Lynch's classic Beastquake run late in the fourth quarter, but that was just part of the Saints' defensive issues on the day. Aside from letting Lynch run for 131 yards, the defense let Matt Hasselbeck throw 4 touchdowns and gave up 41 points to an offense that finished 30th in points per drive in the regular season. For his part, Brees threw for over 400 yards and had 2 touchdowns, leading the offense to 36 points. This was the first time with New Orleans where Brees played more than well enough to win, but was let down big time by factors out of his control. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what team you root for, this would be far from the only time that happened for Brees come January. The 2009 Saints might be the only team to bring a Lombardi Trophy to New Orleans, but in my opinion, the 2011 team was even better, at least offensively. They finished first in points and yards per drive, and Brees had the best season of his career, a season that would have been good enough to win MVP most years if not for Aaron Rodgers' historic 2011 season. Brees broke the single-season record for yards with 5,476 and led the league in touchdown passes with 46. The team scored 40 points 7 times and never scored under 20 points in any of their 18 games. The defense was once again subpar, however, finishing 20th in points allowed per drive and being the reason this historic offense didn't have a finish more reflective of their ability. The NFC was particularly loaded in 2011, so despite finishing 13-3, the Saints didn't get a first-round bye due to a conference win percentage tiebreaker with the 49ers. After defeating the Lions in the wild-card round 45-28, the team traveled to San Francisco to take on the aforementioned 49ers, who were led by first-year coach Jim Harbaugh and a dominant defense. True to form, the 49ers defense started out dominant, jumping out to a 17-0 lead early in the second quarter following 3 early Saints turnovers. The offense would eventually settle in with Brees leading 2 long touchdown drives to cut the deficit to 17-14 at halftime. The third quarter saw San Francisco add a field goal to go up 20-14, but the fourth quarter is when the fireworks began. No offense to Jason Pierre-Paul. The teams traded field goals over the first 10 minutes to give San Francisco a 23-17 lead, but the final 5 minutes were hectic. Brees threw a 44-yard touchdown to Darren Sproles with 4 minutes left to go up by 1, but the 49ers responded with an 80-yard touchdown drive capped off by a 28-yard touchdown run by Alex Smith. But the Saints responded with their own 88-yard touchdown drive capped off by a 66-yard touchdown pass from Brees to Jimmy Graham. They converted a 2-point conversion to go up 32-29 with a minute 37 left. In typical Saints fashion, though, the defense collapsed again, giving up an 85-yard touchdown drive punctuated by a 14-yard touchdown pass from Alex Smith to Vernon Davis with 9 seconds left. The game was effectively over at that point, and the Saints lost by a score of 36-32. Brees threw 2 interceptions, so nobody will pretend he was perfect, but Jesus fuck, the guy threw for 462 yards and 4 touchdowns, including 2 go-ahead touchdown drives in the last 5 minutes, and he lost. I don't see how any rational person can blame Brees for this loss. But regardless of who was responsible, another Saints season in the Brees era was over, and what was to come in the offseason would cripple the franchise for several years. The 2012 Saints season will always be remembered for Bountygate, a controversy where several major members of the organization were penalized harshly due to a program led by defensive coordinator Greg Williams, where players were incentivized to deliberately injure opposing players. Head coach Sean Payton was suspended the entire year, as was Williams. The team was also forced to give up their second-round picks in both 2012 and 2013. Starting linebacker Jonathan Vilma was suspended the entire year, and starting defensive end Will Smith was suspended 4 games. What followed on the field that season wasn't surprising. The Brees-led offense was once again elite, finishing top 5 in both points and yards per drive. Brees had another 5,000-yard season and led the league with 43 touchdown passes. However, he also led the league with 19 interceptions. Whereas before the Saints' defenses had usually been bad, it was now downright horrific, finishing 31st in points allowed per drive and 32nd in yards allowed per drive. Due to the disgustingly bad defense, the team finished 7-9 and missed the playoffs. Winning 13 saw a return to form for New Orleans, bouncing back from a losing season to finish 11-5 and secure a playoff spot. There's no doubt the return of Sean Payton helped, and Brees was his usual phenomenal self, once again throwing over 5,000 yards and 39 touchdowns. The surprise in 2013 was the Saints' defense, who finished 9th in points allowed per drive. But for all his greatness, Brees did struggle in several winnable games down the stretch against St. Louis and Carolina, costing New Orleans a chance at winning the division and a first-round bye. The last-second loss to the Patriots, where they had a 3-and-out and interception in the last 3 minutes, didn't help matters either. Nevertheless, the team went on the road to face the Philadelphia Eagles in the wild-card round. They squeaked out a 26-24 win at the buzzer with a game-winning field goal, giving Brees his first and only career road playoff win. Their reward was getting to face the historically dominant 2013 Seattle Seahawks defense on the road. Unlike the Saints' previous 2 playoff defeats where the defense collapsed and let Brees down, it was the Saints' offense that failed to hold up its end. They were shut out for the first 3 quarters and only crossed the double-digit points threshold with a Brees touchdown pass with 26 seconds left. The Saints recovered an onside kick to make the last 26 seconds interesting, but they were unable to do anything, seeing their season end in a 23-15 defeat to the eventual Super Bowl champions. Knowing what we know now about that Seahawks defense, it's hard to blame Brees for performing mediocre with just 1 touchdown and an 86.3 passer rating. It's similar to the 2006 NFC Championship game against Chicago. The Saints ran into a legendary defense and lost. It is what it is. 2014 was the beginning of a 3-year slog of 7-9 seasons for Brees and the Saints. Brees finished 2014 with almost 5,000 yards and 33 touchdowns, but he also threw 17 interceptions and had several uncharacteristically poor home performances against Carolina and Atlanta. Despite Brees' high turnover count, the Saints' offense remained a machine, finishing 5th in points per drive. The real war to the 2014 Saints came on the defensive side of the ball. Shocker. The team finished 31st in both yards and points allowed per drive. Despite the horrific defense, the Saints were just a few plays away from winning double-digit games, blowing 4 fourth-quarter leads against Atlanta, Cleveland, Detroit, and San Francisco, losing those 4 games by a combined 9 points. Tough scene. 2015 saw much of the same as 2014 for New Orleans. The Saints finished 7-9 once again. Brees actually finished 7-8, missing a loss to Carolina early in the season, largely due to their absolutely atrocious defense, which finished last in both points and yards allowed per drive. The Saints' offense once again placed highly, finishing 6th in points per drive, and Brees had almost 4,900 yards and 32 touchdowns in 15 starts. Although the final offensive ranks looked great, there were several absolute stinkers, such as a 47-14 loss to Washington, a 39-17 loss to Philadelphia, and a 24-6 loss to Houston. Just like with so many of Brees' seasons, it's hard to balance the blame at times. Brees had some mediocre performances and losses once again, but he had almost zero margin for error due to his terrible defense. In 2016, the Saints once again finished 7-9 and missed the playoffs for the 3rd straight season, which should be impossible with a quarterback as good as Drew Brees on your team. So many times before, the Saints' offense led by Brees was excellent, finishing 2nd in points per drive, whereas the defense was once again the worst in the league. Brees had his 5th and final 5,000-yard season and also threw 37 touchdowns, although he did throw 15 interceptions, which is more than you'd like to see. Like 2015, there were also several losses you could pin on Brees in the offense, such as their 16-13 loss to the Giants and 16-11 loss to Tampa Bay. However, there were much more that fell on the defense. The team lost 3 games where the offense scored 34-plus points, and there was an extremely fluky home loss to Denver, where Brees led a tying touchdown drive with 1:22 left, but the go-ahead extra point was blocked and returned for 2 points, giving the Saints a 25-23 loss. The Saints easily could have finished with a worse record also, if not for the offense going off for tons of points, like their 48-41 win versus Arizona, 41-38 win versus Carolina, and 35-34 win versus San Diego. All in all, the Saints had wasted 3 seasons of Brees' prime with atrocious defensive support, but help would be on the way. Entering the 2017 season, Drew Brees was 38 years old and the clock was ticking on his career. If the team wanted to salvage the last few years of his career, they needed to hit on draft picks, and that's exactly what happened. Marshawn Lattimore and Alvin Kamara became multiple-time Pro Bowlers at their positions, while Ryan Ramczyk became an All-Pro lineman. Marcus Williams and Trey Hendrickson also became solid contributors later on. The result of hitting on so many picks saw a revitalized team that finished 11-5 and improved from last to a respectable 13th in points allowed per drive. The offense was once again phenomenal, but unlike before, Brees wasn't asked to carry it. His final stats of 4,334 yards and 23 touchdowns were good, but far from the ridiculous high volume numbers in his prime. The Saints blew 2 fourth-quarter leads and road losses against Atlanta and Tampa Bay that hurt them in terms of playoff position, but overall this was a very good team, and they won the NFC South for the first time since 2011, earning a home playoff game. Against Carolina in the wildcard round, Brees was phenomenal, barely holding off the Panthers in a 31-26 win. The team would then travel to Minnesota to face the upstart 13-3 Vikings, who had an elite defense. The first half was an absolute disaster for New Orleans. Brees threw 2 interceptions and the team missed a 58-yard field goal. As a result, the Vikings had a 17-0 halftime lead. It wasn't until late in the third quarter that New Orleans finally got on the board when Brees found Michael Thomas for a touchdown to make it 17-7 going into the fourth. Much like the 2011 loss to the 49ers, the fourth quarter of this game will be remembered forever, although for all the wrong reasons if you're a Saints fan. The Saints made it a 17-14 game after another Brees touchdown to Thomas following a Vikings interception. The Vikings responded with a field goal to make it 20-14. Final 5 minutes of this game were hectic. Following a botched punt by Minnesota, Brees found Alvin Kamara for a touchdown to put the Saints up by 1 with 3 minutes left. The Vikings responded with a 53-yard field goal to take back a 23-21 lead with a minute and a half left, but Brees was not done, as he calmly led a 50-yard drive that ended with a field goal to take a 1-point lead with 29 seconds left. The game was in hand, and the Saints would be on their way to Philadelphia for the NFC Championship game, until the last play of the game, which saw the Saints give up a 61-yard touchdown to Stephon Diggs to lose an absolute heartbreaker 29-24. While Brees wasn't perfect by any means, throwing multiple interceptions, he did more than enough to win, especially in the clutch, and he was once again let down by his defense. This type of shit absolutely does not happen to Tom Brady, let's put it that way. The 2018 Saints were a juggernaut, finishing 13-3 and securing the 1 seed in the NFC thanks to their dominant ground game and precision passing from their future Hall of Fame quarterback. Brees threw 32 touchdowns and just 5 interceptions as the offense finished second in points per drive. As with 2009 and 2011, he might have won MVP if not for Patrick Mahomes' historical 2018 season. The defense regressed from 13th to 20th in points allowed per drive, but finished 6th in turnover percentage, which helped the team finish first in average starting field position on the year. Come playoff time, they met a familiar foe in the divisional round, the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. The Saints fell behind early 14-0 in the first quarter, but the defense pitched a shutout the rest of the game while the offense did just enough to secure a 20-14 win to advance to the conference championship game for the first time since 2009. Their opponent would be the Los Angeles Rams, led by boy wonder second-year coach Sean McVay. The Saints looked sharp early on, taking a 13-0 lead after the first quarter, but the Rams fought back to make it a 13-10 game at halftime. Teams traded touchdowns touchdowns in the third to make it 20-17 Saints, heading into what would become once again a memorable fourth quarter for all the wrong reasons if you're a Saints fan. The Rams tied the game at 20 with a field goal with 5 minutes left, and what ensued afterwards was a controversy that is still a hot button issue to this day. Brees led the offense 57 yards downfield to the Rams' 13-yard line, where on 3rd and 10 he threw to an open Tommy Lee Lewis in the flat. But before the ball got there, Lewis was absolutely laid out by Rams cornerback Nickell Roby-Coleman. What should have been an obvious defensive pass interference that set the Saints up with a chip shot game-winning field goal attempt ended up forcing the Saints to settle for a field goal with 1:45 left. Rams quarterback Jared Goff took advantage of the officiating gaffe and drove the Rams 45 yards downfield, where kicker Greg Zuerlein nailed a clutch field goal to send the game into overtime tied at 23. In overtime, the Saints won the coin toss, but early on in the drive, Brees' arm was hit as he was throwing and ended up getting intercepted. The Rams took advantage of the good field position, and Zuerlein once again nailed a clutch 57-yard game-winning field goal to send the Rams to the Super Bowl. It's safe to assume that 2018 remains the biggest missed opportunity for lots of Saints fans, and it still stings so many of them because they were rightfully robbed by the officiating. Brees threw the interception in overtime, but the fact remains that there shouldn't have even been an overtime. It's similar to Peyton Manning's overtime interception in the 2012 playoffs versus Baltimore after the Raheem Moore debacle. As we all know, the missed call was so bad the league made it possible to review pass interference for a year. At this point, Brees was now 40 years old, and a series of fluke occurrences stopped him from achieving more playoff success. The 2019 season was a whirlwind for both the Saints and Drew Brees. The team once again finished 13-3 on the back of an elite offense, but for the first time with New Orleans, Brees missed significant time. 2019 was honestly more of a display of Sean Payton's offensive genius, as he helped guide the team to a 5-0 record with Teddy Bridgewater in place of Brees to keep the team's playoff hopes alive. When Brees did play, though, he was still phenomenal, finishing with 27 touchdowns and having an absurd passer rating of 116.3 in 11 starts. The defense finished an average 16th in points allowed per drive, but their terrible performance in a 48-46 home loss to San Francisco ended up being the difference between the Saints having home field advantage throughout the playoffs and not getting a first-round bye. Due to having a worse conference win percentage than the fellow 13-3 Green Bay Packers, the Saints had to play in the wildcard round versus Minnesota. In the wildcard game, Brees suddenly looked 41 years old, refusing to throw downfield, and the Vikings defense capitalized on it for most of the game. But Brees wouldn't be held down forever. After struggling through the first 3 quarters, he led the Saints to 10 points in the last 10 minutes to send the game into overtime tied at 20. Then, Brees' bad luck struck again. He never touched the ball in overtime, as his defense gave up a 75-yard touchdown drive to Kirk Cousins, which ended with Cousins finding tight end Kyle Rudolph in the back of the end zone for the game-winning touchdown to make it a 26-20 loss for the Saints. 2020 ended up being the final season of Drew Brees' career, and it was for sure a bittersweet one. The Saints finished 12-4, but like 2019, Brees missed 5 games due to injury, and he was clearly a shell of 4-1, and the defense was excellent too, finishing 7th in points allowed per drive. The team won the NFC South to clinch home field throughout the first 2 rounds of the newly expanded playoff format, and after dispatching the meek Chicago Bears 21-9 in the wildcard round, they had to face their new super team/divisional rival Tampa Bay, led by the most overrated player in sports history, Tom Brady. For the first time in his illustrious career, Brees would have a truly horrific postseason performance. He ended up throwing for just 131 yards and had 3 interceptions, each one devastating in terms of field position. Brees' first interception set the Bucs up at New Orleans' 3-yard line, his second interception set the Bucs up at New Orleans' 20-yard line, and his third interception gave the Bucs the ball near midfield. The defense did a really good job of slowing down the high-powered Bucs offense, but 4 Saints turnovers were too much to overcome. Despite all the subpar play, the Saints still might have been able to pull it off had Jared Cook not fumbled the ball away near midfield late in the third quarter when the Saints had a 20-13 lead. Cook's fumble set the Bucs up at New Orleans' 40-yard line. All in all, the Bucs' 3 touchdown drives were a combined 63 yards, and Brees had no magic left in his arm for a fourth quarter rally. The final horn sounded and the Saints lost 30-20 to the eventual Super Bowl champions. A few months later, Brees finally announced he was retiring, and I believe it was the right choice. He clearly had no arm left and his body was completely breaking down. So the big question remains, why didn't the Brees Saints win more than 1 Super Bowl in 15 seasons? The biggest culprit in my opinion is obviously the terrible defenses chances the organization gave Brees for virtually his entire tenure. Only 2 times in 15 years with Brees did the team have a top 10 defense. 8 times the team had a below average defense, 6 times the team had a bottom 10 defense, and 4 times the team had a bottom 2 defense. There are so many advanced stats and analytics out there nowadays, but the fact remains that teams win football games by scoring more points than their opponent, and it's hard to see success when your defense is hemorrhaging so many points on a consistent basis, even with the Hall of Fame quarterback. The 2006, 2010, 2013, and 2020 playoff losses were pretty decisive, so there's no what-ifs there. But the losses in 2011, 2017, 2018, and 2019 were all extreme missed opportunities, particularly in 2017 and 2018. It's just not common to see a quarterback lead his team on multiple go-ahead drives in the final 5 minutes just to lose in a playoff game, and it happened twice to Brees in 2011 and 2017. Throw in the worst no-call in history in 2018, losing the overtime coin toss in 2019, giving up 41 points to a 7-9 team in 2010, all of it adds up. So it's not surprising to see the Brees-era Saints not win more jewelry. Brees, for his part, could be turnover-prone at times, but as I mentioned earlier, he normally had almost no margin for error due to his poor defenses.